Well, good morning. If you're paying attention, you probably figured out we didn't finish this project. There was a little too much going on to get it all done in one episode. So what I've done is I've broken this thing up into a number of parts. And in this next phase, after finishing the initial dimension, we're going to tackle the final dimension. And hopefully we can get through that stage. After that, well, you'll just have to wait and see. So I'm heading out to the garage, and you're more than welcome to join me.
Welcome to Roby's Garage Workshop, featuring the craftsmanship of Roby Price. Wine Rack End Table, Part 2, Final Dimension.
Well, good morning. Last night I swept up and placed all my stock on the sawhorses so it could get a little air. And wood will shift a little bit after you dimension it each time, so this is giving everything a chance to acclimate to the humidity in the garage, which unfortunately is high. I've also taken the time to break out the top, and it turned out okay. I have some work to do to clean up the glue on the glue edges, and I will do that with a scraper. What we will do next is go to the drum sander and start to bring everything down to final dimensions. We will do the glue first. I'm going to put it on the bench, get a scraper out, and hopefully not a chisel, and we will get the glue off. I don't want the glue on the drum sander. It has a tendency to gum up the rollers and or the sanding bit, and it leaves streaks. So I do want a good clean surface when I put it in there. So we'll start on that first. Well, I'm going to clean up what glue is left with the scraper, and if you've prepped your scraper right, just feel just a little bit of a burr on the edge, you can make some quick work with this, and that glue will disappear very quickly. Matter of fact, it's probably more work in getting a good scraper, regardless of how it looks, so that it performs well than there is doing the actual job. Well, I'm over here in the third bay. I'm getting ready to do some sanding. This is where my chop saw is, just over here. My wood rack is behind me, and I've got a little bit left of what is typical garage storage in that corner, and I'm trying to minimize that. What I'm going to do is mark everywhere there is a glue joint, just to make sure that we get a good solid connection, no lines visible. I'm also going to mark the whole piece in case there is a low spot or we got some misalignment. We want to take that out. Got good dust collection, and that's a must for one of these tools. I will mark the whole thing, as I said before, in case there's a low spot or some sort of high-low misalignment. The whole intent here is to take this down to an even, perfectly flat dimension. So if you get a raking light on this, it's perfect. So I'm going to turn on the dust collection and we'll get started. All right, well, I've been busy at the drum sander, and I've gotten first pass sanding on just about everything with the exception of the legs. I do want to take these down to 5/8. These are the long pieces that go on the side, and I want that reveal on the end. So I'm going to go back, even though they've been sanded, I'm going to go back to the planer, and I'll take these down to 5/8, come back here and resand them. After that, we're going to be spending a lot of time on the bench doing what I would call semi-finished sanding. These are sanded down to 120 grit, which means on a drum sander like this, we pretty much got to sand it by hand by 120 and then take it to 150. We've also got to knock off these corners on the edges. You can just about cut yourself on these things. They're so sharp. So a lot of work left to do, a lot of prep work left to do before we start cutting all these to length. Finally, the sanding is letting me see the fleck in the grain, and I have made a few changes on which boards go where, and that's solely due to the grain. And that's one of the beauties of actually getting a good sand like this on here. You can see what you've got. So bear with me. We'll be on the bench here pretty soon. No need to show you video of me stuffing boards in a machine like this. You've probably seen it before. Well, I'm off the drum sander, and everything has been sanded flat. I've been doing a lot, and I mean a lot, of hand sanding. Drum sander's great, and it gets rid of all the tool marks. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't give me a fine finish unless I change out the drum. Right now, I'm at 120, and 120 is pretty aggressive on the drum sander, and it leaves a lot of marks. So what I've done is I've come back with 120 hand sanded with the grain, and then I've gone in and gone to 150. Not only that, all these have corners, and the corners were extremely sharp. They would have never taken a finish, and that's not what we want anyway. So all the corners have been rounded appropriately as well. What I've got left to do, I've got the stiles of the rails, and I've got the legs to sand down, and I will do that next here on the bench. I'll start with 120 in my sanding block. I'll come back with 150. I'm going to hit the tabletop with a random orbital sander, and that'll be pretty quick. I don't need to take a lot of time with this, just enough to get it started. Well, I have sanded and sanded and sanded. And that's the thing I've observed about these arts and crafts projects. There are a lot of surfaces, and not all of them lend themselves to a random orbital sander. I have hand sanded everything with the exception of the top, and I'm getting ready to do that. Now, the drum sander will take it down to 120, but because of what it is, when you go to a random orbital sander, you're going to step it down a grit. So I'm going to take a quick pass at 80. I'm getting ready to mark the surface here just to make sure that I know where I've been, and we'll hit it with the pass of 80. Once the pencil marks are gone, we'll kick it up to 120. After 120, it's 150. We'll stop there, and that will, we've already got a very flat surface, so we just need to be smooth and easy as we go across. So again, make your pencil marks, and you're just trying to make sure you understand where you've been. And also with sanding, I'm grinding, I'm not taking away material, so do not use a crayon on this if that is what you would like to do. So I'm set up with my shop vac over there, and I've got my cord set up, so let's go ahead and do some sanding. And this will finish it out for the night. Last clip of the day, I'm going to sweep up and clean up, and that'll be it. Well, welcome back. I have gotten all the pieces sanded down to 150 grit. And the reason for doing that, I know it seems a little out of sequence. Why would you sand this early in the project? I'm sanding this early because I really want to see the grain of the wood. The fleck in this quarter sawn white oak is what makes all the difference. And I want to be very careful in how I select the length and what side to cut off in these pieces. And now that I've got it sanded, I can clearly see what we're going to have in the finished product. So I'm set up here with my miter jig, and I have got a stop, a movable stop set up on my table saw, and I can use my rip fence to help cut these things to length. Also, I've got my gauge right here to help me out as well. So I'm going to get set up over here, and we'll start cutting these to plan length. I do have a plan, and you'll be hearing a little bit more about this as the show progresses. But that's the next step, is we're going to cut everything to length, and we'll do that with the miter jig. We'll also cut the top square, but we'll use the cross-cut sled for that. So bear with me, and we'll get cracking.
With the miter gauge in the saw, place the piece for the first cut, holding it tightly. Don't let the piece slide on the fence and move toward the blade. That will ruin the cut. Turn the piece over and drop the preset stop. Hold the piece again firmly against the fence and the stop. Make your cut. That ensures it's cut to length. 20 more to go. I've placed one flat edge of the tabletop against the back fence of my cross-cut sled. This cut will make a square edge against this side. So now I have two sides, each of which is square to the other. The next step is to make another square side against the back, and we'll use the rip fence for that. Cutting the other side is as simple as setting the rip fence to the correct measurement and then pulling the board over and cutting it to width.
Alright, I've taken the slide off the table, and this is the edge that was against the fence. So I know that these two edges are square. I can set my fence now to 18 inches, which is the width.
We've taken a lot of time to get the top square, and there's no reason not to. Things that are square always look as they should. But if you're off by a degree, your eye will not be able to tell. Additionally, this is not a structural component. There is no other joinery depending upon it to be square. So take your time, get it right, but understand if you're off a little bit here or there, this particular case, it will not matter.
Well, cutting the table wrapped up the final dimension, and tomorrow we will start doing mortises and tenons, and there are a lot of them. Today's been a bit unusual for me. It is my weekend, and various fall decorations have to be assembled, and I got the opportunity to move 2 pallets of rock. So my day has not been focused in the garage. But tomorrow, Monday, we will be bright and early, and we'll be starting on mortises and tenons and maybe some final assembly. So I'll see you then. Well, good morning. It's another day. Weekend is over, honeydews are complete. Now I can put a little more focus into this. I have completed my second dimension, so everything is cleaned up, lengths are right, the boards are dimensioned well, and we're ready to start with the mortises. I like to do the mortises first. We can adjust the tenons to get a good slip fit. My hollow chisel mortiser is the tool that I like to use. Arts and crafts like square tenons, so that's what this tool is made for. I currently have a 3/8 inch bit in the machine, and I have adjusted this stop here for a 1 inch depth setting. The tenons for this call for 3/4 of an inch, but I like a little room in the bottom in case I've got some glue. I don't want a lot of squeeze out on this. It is a real chore to clean up, and this isn't a structural joint, so really what I'm looking to do is get it nice and tight and secured so it doesn't rattle, but it doesn't have to support anything. So I'm here at the station, and my fence is set, my hold is set, my bit has been given a touch of oil, although it will complain. They always do. Well, I've cut all the mortises with my 3/8 bit that I'm going to cut with a 3/8 bit. I've switched over to a 1/2 inch bit, and I have that in my machine now. And I'm cutting the through mortises for the bottom stretcher. Now, one of the things that I'm testing out now is to make sure that I can hit it on both sides and line up correctly. And right now, it's looking pretty good. And one of the reasons for this is I always mark on my leg where the center is. And this face, if I'm drilling from this side, that face goes against the fence. If I'm drilling from this side, the same face goes against the fence. So I'm always guaranteed a reference against this face. You can never get it totally perfect, but if you pay attention to which side goes to the face, you can usually get yourself a pretty good connection in the center. Now the same thing is true with the rails. You need to make sure that the same face is against the fence all the time. That will really help things when it's time to do the dry fit and the final glue up. Well, I'm at the table saw and I'm getting ready to cut the long sides, the flat sides, with my tenon jig. This is an old tenon jig. I had it with my first saw, and of course the tracks don't line up. Nothing lines up. Everything's proprietary. So I've got a little bit of an adaptation here to help along. You need to get this thing set up such that the blade will pass right through here and cut it flat. It makes short work of a cut like this. It's a little finicky though. So my advice to you is to take this jig, or any jig you choose to make. If you index it on the rip fence, that's fine. Indexing it on the tracks, it's all up to you. You can buy it, you can make it. It doesn't matter. But take it slow. I have my 3/8 inch mortises there to test with, and I've been finagling with this for a little while, kind of sneaking up on it. And as you can see, one of the nice things about this is you can make the cut without having any hands close to the blade. A little bit of glue, that'll stick just fine. That's a slip fit. That's what I'm looking for. Well, we've completed all the tenons and the mortises on the legs and the tenons on the rails, and I decided to do some dry fit up. There's a couple of reasons that you really want to do this. First of all, you really want to know if you're going to be square, and we are. We've got good fit up, everything's good and clean, and I love the way the through tenons come just proud of the legs. That worked out real well. But as you might imagine, we've got a number of other pieces to put in. I've got mortises here already drilled. And these are some of the pieces that we're going to be putting in. There are 5 on each side that go in just like this. So although I have a plan and I have measurements, let's face it, nothing is ever perfect. This is actually off by about a 32nd right now. And that's enough to cause a problem. The eye will actually see that. So what I like to do is cut a piece of scrap exactly the same size, and I'll feather in a couple of notches, knock the corners off with a chisel, just to measure, to make sure I know exactly where the shoulder cuts need to be. So that's the first trick, and then we'll take this over to the table saw and we'll get this hammered out. And then we'll do our tenoning jig and then cut the sides. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Well, we're back at the table saw right now, and this is a pretty tight close-up. The intent is to get the shoulders cut, the sides cut all the way around the side. And what I have to do is take this and get him up. I don't have to come all the way to the top, just part of the way to the top, because I've already got a shoulder cut right there. That shoulder cut is a little deeper. It needs to be on purpose so that I get a good clean cutout. That's done right there. Now, what I have done is this moves back and forth this way based on this, and I have pre-calibrated that according to the measure here. Everything's tight and I should be able to move forward. I'll do this 4 times, turn it around each time. More to go. Well, we're back at the bench, and as you can see, we've got a first assembly here. It's time to start working on the corbels, and these are pieces that I've cut. They will go right here. There are 4 of them, and I've told you I have a plan, and I do. It's right here. I've marked here, and I don't know if you can see this very clearly, that line right there. This is actually a scale piece for that corbel. And what I like to do is I like to mark on the back of it with my crayon. And when I do that, and I've marked this up a little bit so you can see a little better, if I transfer this over and take a pencil, once the crayon has been marked in the back. You know, a lot of people will do this with a graphite pencil in the back. Ever since I started using these black crayons, I found more uses for them. And this, of course, is one of them. And I don't know if you can see that or not. Let's see. Yeah, you can probably pick up that. That's good. So this is what I'll use. I'll take this to my bandsaw and I'll cut on them out on the outside of the line. I'll clean it up here in my oscillating belt sander. Once I've gotten a pattern, then I will trace it onto each one of my blanks, and that will help me be more uniform in how I do this. So I'm going to take this to the bandsaw, recognizing, by the way, there is a small spline in here. After we finish cutting these, we'll have to dimension that out, and then of course we'll have to put something in the leg to hold the spline so that the corbel stays put. Anyway, we'll start on the bandsaw.
Stay just outside of the lines. We'll clean up the rest of this on the belt sander. And now it's time to sand things flush. Go ahead and sand directly to the line, making good smooth surfaces. Keep the piece moving. You don't want to dig in or have any gouges. That is something that will need to be sanded away. Also, if the bandsaw did encroach on the line or go past it, you need to sand those out. Keep in mind these are not structural components. If you have to sand a little off here or there in order to maintain a good, clean, smooth line, go ahead and do so.
Well, I'm at the table saw and I finished up doing the preliminary sanding for my corbels. I have to cut a spline in the bottom of them, and to do that I'm going to use the table saw. I have my fence set at about 1/8 of an inch. The blade is also an inch as well, and it's a 1/4 inch spine I'm trying to put on here. So 3/4, there's a 1/4 on each side. I've also raised the blade up to be about 1/4 of an inch high too. 2 passes on each side, and that'll give us the square we need to make it work. The blade's pretty shallow, so in order to control the piece, I am not going to use a push stick for this, but I'll be very careful. Well, the end of this spine right here doesn't go all the way to the end. It goes 1 inch in and stops. So I've got my miter gauge set up, and I've got the fence set at 1 inch, and I will use this to nibble away and get rid of the excess. Well, I'm at the router table and I've got my bit set up at 1/4 inch. It is a 1/4 inch bit. This stop isn't needed, but that stop is set up at the appropriate length to give me the right length of cut. Bit's at the right height. Everything's pretty much set up, so I'm going to go ahead and make this cut. Make sure you mark your boards and double check it. I can't tell you how many times I've made the perfect cut in the wrong place. That's pretty good. I think we'll go with this. Well, I'm back at the table saw to make one of our last cuts. We're just about finished up here with the major cutting. As a matter of fact, the next step is a glue up. What I want to do with these sticks that hold the wine balls up is I want to put a decorative end on them, and to do that I've set my miter gauge at 30 degrees and I have put a block on there I'll cut this way and then turn it 4 times, which will give me a point on the end. And at 30 degrees, I think that'll look really good. Now I put this block on the end primarily because if there's a point here, it may not line up with that dowel. So that will make sure that I have the same length each time. And the end is self-centering, so it shouldn't be much of a problem. I had it this way originally, and I had so much tear out on the end, it just wasn't going to work. Keep in mind, when you cut something this way on a miter, the blade is going to have a tendency to pull the work into the blade, and that will absolutely mess up your cut. So keep good pressure, kind of keep a little bit of pressure this way against the block, and I think you'll be fine. All right, well, we finished cutting up all of our sticks here, and I'm at my shooting board. All I want to do is take one pass over the top to remove any remaining mill marks on there, and it's not a big deal. The Woodworker 2 blade does a real good job of burnishing the ends, but one pass with a good sharp hand plane, and you can't do any better. Oh yeah, that's good. Although we use the shooting board to clean up the ends of the sticks that hold up the wine bottles, we have a decorative tenon, a through tenon here that we need to put a little bit of a chamfer on. And I've got it in my vise here. I've actually got markings on my vise at 30 degrees and 60 degrees. So all this is really here to do is to help me maintain level as I go through and take my little block plane and start to clean up this end right here. Now I've made a line right here so I know how far to go. This is making short work on this. Now when you do this, it's wise to, and I've already done this, cut this chamfer first so that you don't get chip out. That's going to be real good. Perfect.